Hi everyone, welcome. Thanks for joining us from home. My name is Erin Schreiner. I am Executive Director of the Bibliographical Society of America, and I'd like to welcome you to this webinar on IIIF, Mirador, and book history. I want to thank Ben Albritton especially for volunteering to lead these. He stepped up within hours of an announcement, and that was extremely kind of him and Stanford University Libraries for allowing us to partner to bring this to you. Just before we get started, I'll just say that this webinar is being recorded, and by joining the meeting, you automatically consent to such recordings. If you do not consent to being recorded, please do not join the session. That being said, your picture is not visible in the recording, your voice is not audible in the recording. There will be some time for questions and answers. Please just use the Q&A feature, which is at the bottom of your screen, to log your questions, and periodically throughout the session, Ben will answer them. So without further ado, I will mute my microphone and stop my video and turn it over to Ben. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Erin. Thanks all of you for joining us this afternoon. Thanks to the Bibliographic Society of America for hosting this set of events. And thanks to our colleagues from the Archaeology of Reading Project who delivered 2 really great workshops earlier this week. I am also going to turn off my video as I talk, which cuts down a little bit on some of the bandwidth usage here, but we'll keep sharing screen and move on from there. All right, as we get started, I'm assuming that many of you are here because you've heard about IIIF or Mirador or interoperability and want to learn a little bit more about it, particularly how to use some of the tools and available content in your own teaching and research. If you've never heard about IIIF or Mirador, that's totally cool too. Basically, what we're going to talk about over this and the next 2 tutorials is how to use digitized cultural heritage materials from a worldwide network of institutions to do a few very basic things drawn from John Unsworth's notion of scholarly primitives, particularly discovering material, comparing material, and annotating material. A few logistics. We're going to start today with a general introduction. On Monday, we'll look at setting up the Mirador viewer for your own research purposes. And then next Wednesday, we'll look a little bit at using IIIF and some additional tools in your teaching practice. Just as a quick overview, today's session is broken into 3 basic sections. What is IIIF? How to find IIIF content in the wild? And then a quick introduction to the Mirador viewer. This is one of several viewers in the IIIF community, and one which is particularly well suited, I think, for book history across genres and periods, as we'll see. After each section, I'm going to pause for a few minutes to consider questions and let everyone regroup. And we'll talk a little bit more about this shared document where we can also put parking lot questions, and there's some additional links there. I will reshare this bit.ly link when we get to the point where we're going to shift off to that. If there are any questions that can't be addressed in the time we have together, I'll revisit that document and add answers or pointers to other information after today's session. In that document as well, there's linked information that we're working through together today. So you can follow along if you want to, or use that link to come back to with the recording later if you have questions. Okay, so we'll come back to that in a minute. First, let's talk about terms. So IIIF is an acronym for the International Image Interoperability Framework, pronounced IIIF, 3IF, 3IF if you're in France. There's no real structure around that. It just wound up being an acronym that we use. Mirador is an image viewer, one of several that you use in your browser, and that leverages IIIF to provide a platform for a number of different activities. We'll come back and revisit both of those in more detail in a few minutes, but first things first, that's what we're talking about. IIIF, as many of you probably know, is a global community. It shares cultural heritage content from right across the globe, and it's growing fairly quickly. At the moment, we've got hundreds of institutional adopters, thousands of actual users, scores of software applications, and we've surpassed 1 billion digital objects. So there's a lot of content out there for everybody to use. But why would you want to use it? So the first thing I'd like to do is walk through a canned presentation using Mirador. And first we'll look at the Mirador site. We'll come back and do all of this together in a little bit. We could find content in different institutional sites. For instance, here's Galileo's Starry Messenger in the Stanford site. Here it is again in the Cambridge Digital Library. These are also another instance from a different printing in the Bavarian State Library digital collection. Now we could go to each of those different sites and look at the content online, which is great. But IIIF allows us to bring all of this material into a single workspace ourselves. So what we're showing on the screen right now is using the IIIF drag and drop icon to drop that object right onto Van Gogh's head. And I now have pulled that out of the Stanford environment, and I'm looking at it in a Mirador environment that's completely unrelated to Stanford at this point. I can navigate the object as I would in detail with zooming in. Now, Stanford is still serving these images, but I'm controlling how they look in this external software environment. I want to bring in that Cambridge digital object as well, so I'm going to use their drag and drop, bring it into Mirador, and put it in this additional workspace slot. Close their table of contents, and navigate to the same page in their edition of this book. And then we can compare the two engravings side by side of the moon, looking for differences and similarities between the different copies. Next thing I'd like to do is look at the pirated Frankfurt edition alongside the two Venice editions. So we'll open up another workspace slot in just a minute. There we go. And then bring that over from the Bayer-Stutz bibliothek. Now, their drag and drop doesn't work, so we're going to copy the URL for their IIIF object and drop it into Mirador a slightly different way using the load object window here. You can see the pirated copy loaded in, and now we're going to navigate through it just as we did with the others. So in just a few short minutes, we've brought together content from North America, from the UK, and from Europe for side-by-side comparison. And we've hidden a lot of the work that underlies this just by showing how quickly this could be done. So the next thing to do, I think, is take a brief look behind the scenes at what's happening. We're not going to do a deep dive today, but we're just going to briefly take a look at what's happening, and then we'll get hands-on in just a few minutes with actual examples again. So the first thing that we're looking at with IIIF is an application programming interface for image sharing. And it's important to know that all of the institutions participating use this same method for delivering their images. Basically, it looks like a URL, but it allows you to manipulate the region of the interest that you're looking at in the URL itself, the size of the image that you're looking at, whether the image is rotated, the quality of the image, and the format of the image. So all of the participating institutions have agreed for this. And apparently my voice is a little bit soft sometimes, so I will be sure to enunciate a little bit further and try to speak a bit louder. In fact, get a little bit closer to the microphone as well. So the image delivery API is something we'll come back and play with in just a minute. The other piece of information that IIIF cares about, that we care about, is a little package of information that tells viewers how to actually show the object. So it's not a metadata standard, but it's a little bundle of information that gives just enough information for the objects to be portable, for them to be shown in different software environments. So there's a little bit of information about the sequence of images and some of the information about the content. If we think of it this way, this is a representation of an object in the Mirador viewer. The image API is delivering those images into the viewer. The presentation API is giving the structure, including the title, table of contents, licenses, and things like that. That's about all we're going to do in terms of talking about this, because as users, we don't actually need to know about this. The software takes care of this for us most of the time. The one takeaway that I'd like you to have, though, is that we're moving away from having to access content in portals to basically having portable digital objects through IIIF that you can work with yourselves in different environments. Okay, so let's see, I'm going to stop sharing that for a moment and ask quickly if there are any questions that people have as we get started.
I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, and hopefully folks know how we are finding the Q&A, so maybe we can move on, and if anyone has any issues, just you can shoot me an email to bsa@bibsocamer, or put a note in the chat, and I will let Ben know if anything comes up.
Perfect, thank you.
The slides are, yes, are going to be shared with all participants. So this webinar is being recorded and is going to go up on our YouTube channel. So thanks for asking about that.
Great. Okay, so I have now opened up and shared my browser window. It says my screen sharing is paused. 1 second. Let's resume that share. And you should be able to see a shared Google Doc that says IIIF and Mirador for book history. If you want to access this document, the bit.ly URL is here. I'll keep this up for just a minute if you want to navigate to that. And what we're going to cover today is in the IIIF and Mirador basic overview section. There is a link to the tutorials that we'll be walking through together today, if you want to follow along. If not, it's there for you to come back to later. The slides, as Aaron just mentioned, are available here. And if you have bigger questions or concerns that you might want to have addressed later, feel free to add them in this section down below. I'm also going to copy this and put it in the chat for our Zoom conference, just so that we can move along if we need to. And all panelists and attendees. Okay, there's the link in our chat. So I'm going to move over to our tutorial document now, and we'll walk through from here live. So fingers crossed this all works. We have talked a little bit briefly about what is IIIF. Here is the link to the IIIF website. It's a site that's constantly evolving, and we expect to see changes in that site as it comes, but there's a lot of information there now. If you want to follow up on Unsworth's primitives, here's the link to his paper about that. And we discussed already the two APIs, the image API and the presentation API. So the first thing I'd like to do is just get a little bit hands-on with that image API. And I'm going to link out to Jack Reed's Learn IIIF tutorial to do this. Clicking on that image playground, I just wanted to clarify what the image API is. First of all, it's serving content from a specific location, specific image or set of images. And then there are a bunch of things that we're going to be able to manipulate down here. So this is happening on the fly in your browser. We can resize the image that we were looking at to a smaller image. And instead of using a cropped portion of the image, we can look at the full thing. And so you can see that before Martin Luther King Jr.'s head was cropped and it was a little bit larger, we now have the full image and change the size. If we want to, we can rotate the image or reset it. And a little bit more esoteric would be things like quality from color to grayscale. In this case, it's default. So these were black and white images, so they're grayscale as they are. But feel free to play around with this, the playground here, just to get a feel for what the image API can do for you. The other thing that enables for us is to allow us to crop IIIF images and reuse them very easily. So we're going over to Trinity College Dublin at the moment, or sorry, this is probably UCD. And they have a little image cropper where we can choose a region of this image that we want. And it's generating a IIIF URL for us on the fly. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy that URL. And we have now got a reusable cropped image being served by UCD, a little bit zoomable, but something that could be embedded in a blog or other web page. Okay, any questions about that so far? Great. Just a little reminder that the presentation API uses the term manifest for that bundle of information that IIIF relies on to enable sharing of books and manuscripts across viewers and institutions. You'll come across the manifest in a couple of different ways, either as a IIIF icon or by a URL. You can read more about that at Learn IIIF or for a real deep dive in the specification IIIF.io presentation. And lots of people in the community are happy to answer questions about the details around that manifest. We're going to leave that for now, though. So we started off with a canned presentation showing Galileo's Starry Messenger side by side from different repositories. Let's walk through how that presentation was created. And then you can retry this at home if you'd like to. First things first, I've gone out and found a number of different copies of the Starry Messenger, some from the Venice 1610 edition, some from the pirated Frankfurt edition, across different institutions. So we've got Stanford here, we've got the Boston Public Library on the Internet Archive, Smithsonian copies are on the Internet Archive. Linda Hall Library has theirs up through their Content DM, digital library representation. The BNF has a copy in Gallica. The Bavarian State Library has 2 copies of the Frankfurt pirated edition on their site. And then Cambridge University Library has the Venice edition on the Cambridge University Digital Library site. So we could go out to each of these sites and let's just grab a couple and take a look. We'll go first to the Internet Archive for the BPL Frankfurt edition. And you can see it presented in the Internet Archive book page turner, which is wonderful. It's nice that it's all there. We can look at a copy from Linda Hall as well and see it in their Content DM setup and navigate through to the title page. Let's see. And Sonia, I see your question. I'll come back to that in just a minute. The BSB, we'll take a look at theirs as well. And so we found these all by going out to different institutions, looking in their catalogs and seeing what they had available. It's not entirely clear from the Internet Archive, for instance, that theirs are available by IIIF, but we will look at a little workaround for that. There's a big problem in the IIIF community at the moment around discovery of IIIF compatible materials. It's something that the community is working to fix, but in the meantime, we've got some behind the scenes ways of checking to see if institutions are compliant and then building the URL structures that we need. So I'm going to choose 3 of these. We'll start with the Stanford copy here, and then we're going to look at 2 other copies. Let's look at the Cambridge copy and the BNF copy. And so if we look at, oh, sorry, actually, no, we'll look at one of the Smithsonian copies. So the Internet Archive has a behind-the-scenes IIIF manifest, and it follows this particular rule. If you find the item ID and you insert it into this URL structure that I'm highlighting right now, you can create a manifest. So we'll start with this link from above to the Smithsonian copy. We're going to take the identifier that's in the middle here, and we're going to put it into that IIIF manifest structure. And I'll just go ahead and copy that and show you what we see when we do that. A whole bunch of JSON, which hopefully we don't have to read in any detail. The BNF follows the same sort of structure. You get the ARC identifier and drop it into their manifest pattern. And all of the content, DM content, can be found through the IIIF Explorer that we'll look at in just a minute. So Linda Hall is covered that way, as are other content DM institutions. So then we're going to bring this all together in Mirador. The way I'm going to do that is to go to the Project Mirador site. And for today's work, we're just going to use the live demo that's there on the Mirador site. So when I go to the demo, I find 2 faces of Van Gogh because we're set up that way. I'm going to close one of those by clicking an X. And then I'm going to, drag the Stanford copy over to that tab and drop it on Van Gogh's head. Then I'm going to go to the Mirador navigation tools and add 2 slots because I want to add 2 additional copies. First copy I'm going to take is this one from the Smithsonian. I'm going to add that through the load window. We're going to do this particular task a couple of times together so that it's clear. Go ahead and open that up. And then the next one I'll open up is from Gallica. So we'll go back to the load window, add that manifest here. And now we have quickly built 3, though the BNF doesn't seem to be loading. There we go, a little bit slow. Okay, so there's a question. Is there a preferred browser for Mirador to perform best in? Firefox and Chrome seem to work best, though all of the modern up-to-date browsers work pretty well. There's some inconsistencies with Safari and with some of the Microsoft offerings, but Firefox and Chrome seem to be in step at the moment for how we work with these materials. Thanks for that question, Jason. Sonia asked, let's say I found another edition of the same text from an institution that has digitized the book, but they're not IIIF participants. Could I download an image of the page in which I'm interested and drop that image file into Mirador? That is something, Sonia, that we want to have happen in Mirador, but at the moment it doesn't work. So right now it's just content that's available via IIIF for our purposes. Thanks for those questions, though. Okay, so we've rebuilt together the side-by-side comparison of Galileo's Starry Messenger. Let's move on to finding content across the world in IIIF. And the first thing we're going to look at, because I'm kind of excited about this one, the OCLC IIIF Explorer brings together all content for Content DM institutions. And Content DM is a big content management system for North American institutions particularly. So this winds up aggregating just dozens and dozens of institutions, including our friends at Linda Hall and elsewhere. So I'm going to look for John Ogilvy and see what kind of things we might find here. And it looks like we've got a large number of Ogilvy maps that appear right away. Everything in this aggregator is IIIF by definition. So if you can find it in here, you know it's something that you can work with. We can see which organizations are contributing. And it's a pretty good mix, not just North American, but also into Europe as well. And so this is a nice way of looking at a large swath of IIIF content fairly quickly. If we drop into one of these items, then you see it loads up in a viewer very similar to the viewer that we're looking at now, Mirador. And in fact, this is the newer version of Mirador that's still lacking a few of the more scholarly tools, but it's basically the same code base. Now, if we wanted to find the IIIF Manifest for anything in the IIIF Explorer by OCLC, we can click on this 3-bar icon in the top left and just scroll to the bottom. And there's that manifest that we were interested in using. So if we copy this, and go back to Mirador, we can replace this object, load that in. We see it loads up right away. And now we've brought in something from the OCLC IIIF Explorer as well. So lots of content there to play with. Another big aggregator is Biblissima, and they've got about, well, they say 73,000 digitized manuscripts and rare books now, but I think they're on target to be at about 80,000 shortly. So they are pulling in content from collections across Europe, which is kind of nice. Let's go ahead and see what they have available first of all. I clicked on the magnifying glass here to get everything that they're showing right now. 72,584 results across a large number of repositories. And we can filter down a little bit further by a number of different facets. So location, language. Let's change the dates here to 1450 to 1501 and see what that gives us. It gives us 18,891 books and manuscripts for that 50-year period. And if we look in the Mazarin library, we see a number of incunables start to show up. These work the same way. This IIIF drag and drop icon will allow you to pull this over into Mirador. Go ahead and replace that. And now we've brought something in from Biblissima right away as well. And can start building up on the fly comparisons this way. A quick aside then, a number of these different institutions like the Vatican have their IIIF logos hidden just a little bit. So just as an example, let's take a look at the digital Vatican library and look at one of their items just to get a sense of how you could find their IIIF logos. Go ahead and drop into one of the first manuscripts that we have here. And it's not immediately apparent how to get to their IIIF manifest, but if you click on the eye icon, then it crops up right away. And this is drag and droppable, or you can copy their manifest URL and paste it into Mirador as we did before. So a little challenge to you, if you're interested in doing this alongside me, find a book or a manuscript that interests you from any of the links above, find that IIIF badge or URL, and bring it into your Mirador workspace at this link, projectmirador.org demo. As a quick aside, there is a browser plugin that you can use that will show hidden IIIF manifests if they happen to be on the page but not made immediately apparent, and you have this browser plugin enabled. It's there for you to just pick up in the browser. So the first thing I'm going to do is go back to that Vatican object. As we follow through this quick exercise, I'm going to find the manuscript that I want, which is the one that I was looking at. I'm going to copy this IIIF manifest URL. And then I'm going to go back over to Mirador and replace my final open slot with this Vatican manuscript and load it up. And you'll see that some institutions have tables of contents for their material. This is a great thing. Not everybody does, but it allows you to navigate through the book according to the different sections that they've laid out for you. But you can also hide that. And there we go, 3 new objects from different sources in a comparison view. All right, that's about another 10-minute block. So I'm going to take a break for a minute and open up the floor to questions. If anybody has anything that they would like to ask, now would be a great time. And if you've got longer-term questions that you're thinking about, don't hesitate to add them in our shared Google Doc. And I'm going to pause for just 1 second and grab a little sip of water, and then I'll be right back. Okay, no questions cropping up immediately, which I guess is good. Hopefully it doesn't mean that I'm going too slow with this. We'll move on to the next section. And as you work through these, don't hesitate to just ask questions, email me, hit me up on Skype, Slack, Twitter, wherever you can find me. So for the final section today, we're just going to walk through the basics of Mirador. And we'll talk a little bit about where Mirador comes from and why it's set up the way it is. So first things first, when we started working on interoperability in IIIF almost a decade ago, we were doing it because the Mellon Foundation had supported a bunch of different manuscript digitization projects. Parker on the Web, the Roman de la Rose Digital Library, the eCodices project in Switzerland. And each of those different projects created their own little silo of content. We recreated viewers, each building their own. The wheel was reinvented a number of times. And as soon as all of these projects launched with Mellon funding, people began asking why it wasn't possible to compare across those sites. They were all doing basically the same thing. They were sharing content that people wanted to compare, and yet each site was its own entity. So the Mellon Foundation very graciously contributed some funds to explore what interoperability would look like. And we worked with a number of scholars and librarians and software developers to understand what some of the basic tasks were that were desired. And out of that came the Mirador project. Now, I should say that Mirador is only one of many viewers available to the IIIF community. It is particularly well suited for comparison and annotation. So we'll walk through a couple of those tools in comparison and annotation in the open demo that we've been using so far. So the first thing to talk about is that Mirador is highly configurable from a user's point of view. You can change the layout to have a number of different windows open at the same time, and then add items to those. Let's go ahead and close a couple of those down. The basic viewing experience is probably familiar to most of you. Pan and zoom are very slippy, uses OpenSeaDragon underneath. So it's a fairly common web interface feel. But what makes Mirador special are some of the tools that are added in here. So I'm going to just bring up our side-by-side view first. Right now, we are pulling content from 2 different institutions. And each object can be manipulated separately. So if we click on the radio buttons here, it says toggle image manipulation. You can rotate the image in the browser You can change brightness and reset that. You can change saturation and contrast and reset that. You can toggle to grayscale if you wanted to. You can invert the colors, which has been helpful for folks who are working with offsets and with palimpsests to get a slightly different view. And you can flip on the vertical axis as well. Also good for offset material for books. So those tools are built in, and additional tools get added by projects as they need them. So if you're thinking of something that you would like to do with an image in the browser, please go for it. Let's see, quick question came in from Aaron. Can you clarify the difference between using the demo site versus downloading to your laptop? That's a really good question, Aaron. So the project mirador.org demo doesn't allow you to keep anything permanently in the space. So it is basically refreshed every time you refresh your browser. So if what you want to do is build up a teaching collection of books or manuscripts, or set up a specific comparison that you want to be able to come back to time and time again, that's what we'll work on Monday in terms of downloading Mirador and configuring it for yourself. If all you want to do is quickly compare objects side by side that are out in the environment and share them through screen sharing like we're doing now, the demo version is great. It's pretty much always up and you can manipulate it, but you can't save anything. So that's the main difference. All right, there are also annotation tools built into Mirador. And I just clicked on the speech bubble icon at the top left of the left-hand Van Gogh. And you can see that people have run some machine learning algorithms on this already and presented the annotations that came out of that, including, it looks like, emotion and maybe clothing recognition. So run through Google Vision and then presented as annotations. So you can just show annotations that already exist, or we'll go over to the other Van Gogh here. You can look at somebody found an eye here, or you can make your own annotation. And save it for the moment and come back to it. It still has an ear here. And so if you were working with students, you could have them annotate an image or a book page, spotting differences between editions or copies. And if you were not working in the demo environment, you could save those. In the demo environment, as soon as I clear my browser cache, these will disappear because they're only local to me at the moment. All right. There's some viewing modes that are available for us in Mirador. Gallery view shows you all of the thumbnails. Book view. If you have 2 pages at a time, we'll try to build a 2-page view. In this case, it starts with a cover and then assumes that the next 2 images are a side-by-side page. And doesn't work great for artistic representations like this, but for books, it's sort of an automated approach to getting a book view. Scroll view has lower resolution images and allows you to quickly scroll through a book or a collection of images. And single image view, of course, gives you high resolution views of specific images. You can turn on and off the thumbnails by clicking on the 3 buttons here. You can zoom in and out with your mouse or with these buttons here. You can resize the image by clicking home. You can add more slots to your workspace using the 4 squares here. And if there's information available in the panel, it'll be in these three line icons. Finally, there's additional information available in the eye icon. No matter which Mirador you're working in, this will work. And it will show just the information that an institution has shared with you. So there's a manifest, there's unspecified rights, and a brief description of the content. The last thing to show for this is when we replace the object, Mirador can have a number of materials in its load window. The demo object has a bunch of things preloaded, and you can add to those, as we've done in this demo, by adding URLs here. But as soon as, in the demo, as soon as we refresh that, they'll disappear. However, you can build this fairly easily in HTML so that you've got your own collection to draw from, and we'll show you how to do that on Monday, if that's something that you're interested in doing. Okay, so back here, for a quick exercise, I'm just going to walk you through how to build up a workspace that compares 2 or more manuscripts from what's in the load window. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to Replace Objects, and I'm going to choose a manuscript from eCodices. I'm then going to add a slot to the right, add a new item, pull in a Vatican manuscript, close that table of contents, and then I'm going to add one final object so that we can compare 3 different periods. And let's bring in French. And we can compare 3 different types of manuscripts fairly easily across 3 different institutions, and zoom in to the level of detail that we would like to. And that is just a quick tutorial on how to build up that workspace in the Mirador demo. There's one more section that I'd like to cover with Mirador before we get too far afield, which is the advanced features demo. But before we do that, Sonia asks, what is the max number of comparison windows that one can use simultaneously? And Sonia, it's basically infinite. 5 by 5 here starts to really mess with your screen real estate, and you can't see a whole lot once you're in here. But you can build up small details across a number of different objects and just keep adding them as your screen will allow. Back to the advanced features. What I'd like to do is take a look at a manuscript from Yale that's set up to look at multispectral imaging. So this is a little bit more complicated than simple annotation and comparison, but it does allow those of you who are working with multispectral images for palimpsests, for conservation, for changes in a book over time, to fairly quickly look at different layers of images. So Mirador allows you to turn on and off registered images. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the visible light image here and take 2 registered images below. And you can see that they layer up, showing basically the last one that you added. The hope with this Yale project was to determine whether the red for this rubric was the same as the red for the pen scrollwork, decorative scrollwork here, and also to try to recover material that had been damaged by mold. So within our layers, we can change the opacity, and you can see that all of the red drops out in that particular spectrum. And also that you can see a little bit more clearly the text that had been damaged by mold. So that's more of an advanced thing, but it's there if you're interested in working with it. There are a few examples out in the world, and we're always looking for more. So if you happen to be doing spectral imaging or analysis of your books, please let us know. All right, any questions about working with Mirador at this point? Okay. Then I'm going to go ahead and conclude because we're coming to the end of our scheduled time for this. But in conclusion, I wanted to give you some ways of reaching out to the community. I hope to see most of you here on Monday for our Mirador in-depth workshop to get it set up on your own computer or space. But if you happen to want to strike out on your own, there are a lot of resources available for you. The IIIF community has put together a resources list here that covers everything from how to find content to the different types of software that are available for you to work with. There is a very welcoming discussion list via email for the community, and they're particularly happy to answer questions from people who are just getting started with IIIF. Lots of people standing by to answer questions. If you happen to like using Slack, there's a fairly robust amount of activity on the IIIF Slack. There are bi-weekly community calls, either technically focused or community focused. And from the names that I've seen in the list, I know that some of you have actually attended those. And then Twitter is also a nice place to reach out. The team at IIIF_IO is very responsive. If you want to share IIIF content, the hashtag IIIF is there. Or really anytime, feel free to reach out to me directly at BLA222. I'm particularly interested to know if this format is working for you, if it's helpful to have the additional document to walk through the examples. And I'll go ahead and start setting up tutorial 2 and tutorial 3 over the weekend so that if people want to get a jump on things, they can. Any last questions before we sign off?
Well, I'll just leap in here and say, Ben, this is fantastic. I have learned so much. And especially for the bibliographical community, being able to see how we use these tools to compare multiple copies of the same thing at the same time is like, it's just a joy. So thank you very much for leading us through this and preparing these amazing resources. And thanks so much to all of you for joining us. I hope that you'll join us on Monday, and you can contact me with any questions about registering as well.
Great, thank you, and thank you all. Please stay healthy, and thanks for joining us.
Bye, everyone.